Adrienne Clarkson writes of a Canada shaped by belonging, a nation whose citizenship is a necessary mediation between an individual and society. It is the subject that Madam Clarkson knows well, having immigrated to Canada herself. It's also part of the Massey Lecture series and the subject of her new book, Belonging, the Paradox of Citizenship. And we now welcome back Canada's 26th Governor-General to our studios. Hello again, Adrienne Clarkson.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm just terrific. Great to have you back here.
It's always great to be on the agenda.
Thank you for saying so. When I was a kid, I think Roland Michener was the Governor-General, and he decided that participation and physical health for the country was going to be the thing that he wanted to focus on. He was going to champion that. And I just want to take, before we get to the specifics of your talk this year, I just wonder how and why you decided that citizenship was going to be it for you.
I think the most important thing is that people feel when they have citizenship, because it's one of the most important things about the organization of states now and of nations, is to have citizenship. It is the thing. That when we think about Canadian citizenship, we know that it is probably the most valued citizenship in the world. People think it's a treasure. And those of us who have been citizens for a long time, or those of us who have been born here or have been citizens for generations, kind of know it, but we don't appreciate what it means when you've come here from someplace else, and after 5 years, 6 years, you become a citizen. You become fully part of what Canadian life is. And you become part of a country where they don't impose on you what a citizen must be. A citizen must be a certain race and have certain values and be able to say, we the Gauls, the way in France, in the French education system, which is used in the Maghreb, in North Africa. Little children, who are Islamic and who speak Arabic say, we the Gauls in grade 1, and they're not Gauls, but that is what you're supposed to be if you are to be French. In Canada, we don't do that. We have the idea of what you can be and what you can offer, and that is what has made our citizenship. And it's a unique kind of citizenship in the world, very unique.
Unique, but interesting that you say it's the best one in the world, and of course, the assumption is the American citizenship, the American passport is the best thing in the whole world to have. You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. When I look at Ferguson, Missouri, I don't think so. I think they have so many unresolved problems in the United States having to do with racism particularly, and not to do with multiculturalism, because we have multiculturalism, they have racism. There's an unresolved problem in the United States that's written right into the contradiction of their Declaration of Independence, in which they talk about all the ideals of the Enlightenment, we the free, etc. And these men who wrote that and who signed it and who were brilliant intellects, people like Jefferson and so on, had slaves. And they were able to sign their names to this document. Who did they mean? And they called, a slave, a black person, was only 2/3 of a human being in terms of the Electoral College. So you have these inherent contradictions in a place like the United States. I prefer Canada, where we don't have that. What we have really is a country which is very strongly based in a British tradition of the Magna Carta, which was, nearly 1,000 years ago now, and of the freedoms established there, that was revamped in the Revolution of 1660 so that parliamentary democracy came to the fore and constitutional monarchy was anchored. And then we were able to develop all our rights and freedoms till we have, a wonderful Charter of Rights and Freedoms and a parliamentary democracy and common law and civil law, and are able to bring those things together. And we have a very complex kind of citizenship. But when people come here and they learn about it and they take part in it, they realize the advantages that we have in Canada that nobody else has.
Well, advantages, yes, but nevertheless, you talk about in your subtitle the paradox of our citizenship. What are you referring to there?
Well, I think the paradox really is that people come here and they bring a lot of things with them. We have people coming from about 109 different countries to Canada at any given citizenship ceremony, and I see this through my Institute for Canadian Citizenship because we do these ceremonies. There are 49 people, getting citizenship. They come from 28 different countries. And you know that yourself when you ride the subway, you see them, you see this development. This morning I was walking along towards Huron Public School because I was meeting somebody at 9 o'clock for coffee. And the children coming towards the school, you didn't know what country you were in because you saw them all races, all colors, and different feelings. There's no other country in the world that has that.
So that's how you knew you were in Canada.
That's how I know I'm in Canada. And when I look around a subway car or a bus, I can see that I'm in Canada, because if I close my eyes, I hear everybody speaking in vaguely Canadian accents. I open them and I don't know where they're from. And I think that's wonderful. And we're used to that. We're used to the fact that we see that diversity all around us. No other country is like that in the world.
Well, we're used to that in urban Canada. Are they used to that in rural Canada?
Well, you'd be surprised, because in places like Red Deer, Alberta, and smaller towns in Saskatchewan, they are getting to be used to it because they have jobs there. And so they're attracting landed immigrants and people from other countries. And they, in the case of Saskatchewan, actively advertised for them. You know, in the subway, there were ads about 3 or 4 years ago saying, "Come to Saskatchewan if you're a new immigrant. We want you. We have jobs," etc. And I think that's what you're going to be seeing. And I think that that's why when we say to ourselves, the Canada that we knew when we were growing up, and you know, I have a nostalgia for that. I grew up in a very white bread, white Canada with white snow, and sometimes
which you did well by.
I did very well by, because I was kind of a novelty. And being a novelty, there was no prejudice against me, even though we were in the Chinese head tax registry, as I learned when I did research for my book. Nobody ever took any action about that. We never paid the tax. We were never approached about it, and I wouldn't have known about it had a PhD student not sent me the page in the ledger, because Canada, in its own way, but basically has a kind of attitude of benevolent neglect. And that benevolence is really wonderful, because it basically, the decency of Canadian people, and they are extraordinarily decent people. I've lived in other countries, and I can tell you for sure that we are the most decent country. We have had terrible things in our back history, and not so far back. I mean, I had already been in this country a year when the Japanese Canadians were all taken from the West Coast and put into virtually concentration camps in the interior of BC, had all their civil rights taken away from them, people who had been born here. And that was a dreadful thing. And we still haven't resolved anything to do with the major things to do with Aboriginal peoples and their aspirations. There are many things that we have done wrong, but every time we think that something has gone wrong, we do try to redress it. Now, the Japanese Canadians, we gave them each $20,000 each.
And an apology.
And an apology. And I think the apologies are very interesting, because I don't go into this in the book, but actually I'm working on something and thinking about it in terms of apology and forgiveness. And it's actually true that it is easier to forgive than to be forgiven.
It's easier to do the forgiving.
It's easier to do the forgiving. To be forgiven, you know, you have to acknowledge that you did something wrong, and then what do you do about it because you've been forgiven? And different religions do different things about that. And what is very interesting, that a society like Canada's is a forgiving society. And every time we're put in a position where we suddenly realize, or slowly realize, we did something wrong, we say, you know, really, we would like to be forgiven. And
well,
that is a very interesting stance for a country to take, because it's not common. And countries have to be very sophisticated in their ethical value in order to do that.
Well, let me pick up on what I suspect you think, and most people think, is the sort of worst stain this country is still dealing with, and that is the Indigenous peoples who have not had the apology and not had justice on a lot of things that they're dealing with. What did, in your context with Aboriginal leaders, what did you learn from them that you could apply to your thinking about citizenship?
Well, one of the things that I think was really important is the idea of the circle. You know, just the image of sort of geometrically of the circle, and that's what they do everything in. They have circles, and you can just open your hands and you include the other. And the circle is a very, very important image, and it's also what they do in terms of healing circles, justice circles. They sit and all look at each other, because in a circle you all have to see each other. You all have to acknowledge each other, and it's not a hierarchy. And so that is what we learn from them. And they let us in. And I talk about Grand Chief John Kelly in 1971 when he addressed the Ontario government, and he said, you know, we are letting you in as we've let you in always. But we are in this together, and he talked about environment. if we destroy, if the environment is destroyed, it isn't just the native people that are going to be destroyed. It's all of us, because we're in it all together. We've included you. And this is, I think, one of the most profound statements about our society that we could possibly have, that we know that we have been included and we are included. The other thing that I learned very much, I was very happy that my first royal assent that I gave as Governor General was for the Nisga'a people who negotiated their treaty. You know how long it took them to negotiate their treaty?
No.
Nearly 50 years. And that took the best part of the lifetimes of a chief and his son, Chief Joe Gosnell, who was by then 60-odd. He had spent 35 years negotiating this treaty in order, as he said, when we took him on a state visit to Chile and Argentina, where he spoke to indigenous people there, in order for them to have 1/10 of the salmon in the rivers that they had when white people came, in order to have 1/25 of the use of the forests that they'd had when the white people came. And that took 50 years just to negotiate, took all of their adult lives. And they're highly intelligent, wonderful people who could have been doing other things to bring their communities along. And we were holding them up doing this negotiating.
What turns you on about the Kingdom of Bhutan so much?
I think the Kingdom of Bhutan, with its gross national happiness as an indicator of well-being for the nation.
Let's point that out. It's not gross national product,
No.
gross national happiness.
Yes.
And they're number one in the world, apparently.
Well, they are, because they have a most extraordinary feeling about themselves, which is based in their Tibetan Buddhism. But it's also about things, the four tenets of it are tolerance, perseverance, patience, and ethics.
Very Canadian.
Very Canadian. And we basically are part, we can be part of that. If we look at that from a Canadian point of view, that's the way in which we basically like to deal with people, and the way in which we are dealt with, usually. And when we're not, we get quite upset about it. I think we are pretty smart about that.
What are you going to say to those who say you are looking at all of this through very rose-colored glasses and overly romanticizing the way things are?
I don't think I am. I think I've seen the world, first as a journalist for many, many, many years. I've seen really ugly stuff and met really evil people, and they were Canadian. And I think we are not exempt from people who are, bad people, and we're not exempt from bad things at all. But what is really interesting about Canada is that we're very good at turning things around if we want to. And there is the will to do that. There is always the will in Canada to do better, to somehow improve. We don't say things like they do in old countries, as in Europe. We don't say things like, that's the way it's been and that's the way it should be, because that's how we get our privileges. That's how we contain power. That's how we continue what we have. We are always open to new things and new ways of doing things. And we've welcomed all these people from all over the world. And that was written right into the very beginnings. La Fontaine, who was the first French-Canadian Prime Minister of United Canada in 1848, gave a speech to his electors of Terrebonne in which he said, we have to open our country to those in the world. He said this, and he was a French-Canadian Catholic Prime Minister of this little frozen country. We will open our doors to the world in order for people to come here and become, like ourselves, Canadian. From all over the world, he said. He didn't say from Europe. He didn't say from Northern Europe. He didn't say from Catholic Europe. He said from all over the world. And he was well-read and an interesting person. I mean, he knew that people would be able to come as long as transportation could bring them. But there was always, later in the 19th century when Italians came. I mean, I've read documents by very upright figures, principals of Queen's University, saying, are Italians really white people, when they were coming? Are Hungarians really European people? Aren't they sort of Oriental? Don't they have high cheekbones? Things like that. Magyars, aren't they actually Orientals?
So you like the fact that we seem to be descended today from La Fontaine as opposed to some of those other folks?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we are descended from that. And that's where we've been saved. Every time we've been able to pick ourselves up and say, look, we want this to continue. And we've been able to do it because we live in a country which is an enormous challenge from a geographic and a climatic point of view. You can't sit around and have fruit drop into your laps and, you know, be quite happy, because you live through our winter, you've got to live through droughts, you've got to live through this huge country with all the changes in it. And I think it's given us our biggest challenges and also made it possible for us to help each other. Because that's where you see it, in the prairies, actually, and I traveled a great deal when I was Governor General and before when I was a journalist and on the Fifth Estate. I would say that to see what happens in the place like the prairies is to understand where cooperation really began with people. They came out, they were given 640 acres of land, and they had to kind of get together and do things and help each other and organize educational systems and medical things, and they did, because we have this great big country with, luckily for us, a fundamental basis of parliamentary democracy. We must never, ever forget that we have parliamentary democracy. That makes us so different from a country like Argentina, which has the same kind of agricultural strength, also minerals, etc. And they've had nothing but chaos, dictatorships, etc., because they never had a structure, an infrastructure such as we have had. We have to value that, our parliamentary democracy, our common law, our civil law. And we're very fortunate on top of that, we have bilingualism.
I'm coming back with a bit of a nasty question here. You ready?
Yep.
Do you think our Prime Minister values parliamentary democracy enough?
You know, as Governor General, I never answer political questions.
But you're not GG anymore.
No, I know, but I still hold to the fact that I will never run for political office, and I don't give my political opinions. I think that whoever runs this country has to understand the difficulties that we go through, and has to understand also that our parliamentary democracy and the Charter of Rights are the most important thing for us.
He never asked you to prorogue Parliament, so you can sort of get around that, can't you?
I think if you are going to prorogue Parliament, you have to know very well who prorogued Parliament and why, and how you get it done in terms of what is actually the right thing to do. And that is very, very important to know. And I wasn't in that position.
Not with Stephen Harper, that is true. I want to ask you about another recent tragic event that happened in our country's history not that long ago. 2 men in uniform shot and killed, and for being in uniform. One in Ottawa shot, the other one run over. To what extent do you think those kinds of national crises bring this country together?
I think all crises bring us together. I think that when we have a crisis, we realize that, you know, we have what we have as a country, and all the things that we hold so dear and that we live by and that we take for granted often so much. Our freedom, our very freedom of being able to walk around and everything. People come up to me when I'm, you know, at the Young Bloor intersection of the subway, because I'm often through there, and they say, "What are you doing here? Why are you by yourself? You were Governor General. Why are you on the subway?" And I said, "Because this is Canada. You know, I can go anywhere. I love going anywhere." Because
you don't have Secret Service protection.
I don't have anything.
OPP protection.
No, I
like
don't.
That.
And it was not offered, and it wasn't. I suppose if I felt I needed it, I could ask for it. But I think that it's wonderful that you can serve for 6 years with all kinds of close protection, etc., because that seems to go with the office, and then you can come home and be a normal person. I think it would be very deforming to have that kind of attention all your life. It gave me a real sympathy for those people who have it all their lives and what it must do to them, because it is very invasive. It's invasive on your mental space, it's invasive on your physical space, and really quite terrifying.
It is. I'm curious again on your view, when those incidents took place and those military deaths happened, there were a number of Canadians who said, "Oh my God, this is just not Canada."
Yes,
were you one of those people?
No, I don't think so, because I think that in those cases, this criminal action of killing these people and a single deranged person is everybody. You know, I decided at the time John F. Kennedy was killed, and that was, it's 51 years ago now. It just was the other day, and I remember how we all reacted to that. But anybody who can sacrifice their own life can kill anyone. You know, anyone who's willing to say, "I don't care what happens to me as long as I kill so and so." And I think what is awful is to think that an innocent person who's doing their duty gets killed. and who is doing their duty as a soldier particularly, and I think very highly of the military. I'm the Colonel-in-Chief of the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm proud of the men and women who serve in that regiment. So I think it was a shock to Canadians, just as it was a horrible shock at the Polytechnique. 15 women were killed who were engineering students because a maniac thought women shouldn't be engineers.
And let's not say his name, because he doesn't deserve the publicity.
He does not deserve the publicity, but I always remember December 6th never comes and goes without my either going to a vigil or thinking about it if I'm not in Canada, because that's the kind of action. And we are never in a free society immune from somebody taking advantage that way if they wish to.
It's interesting, though. You described what happened to the soldiers as a criminal act as opposed to a terrorist act. Did you say that purposely?
Yes, I think it was a criminal act because
as opposed to a terrorist act.
I don't think we have any evidence that. To me, a terrorist is somebody who works with a group of people who are dedicated to the overthrow of something or other. Because when I was in university, particularly, I did a paper on anarchism. And the anarchists were ready to sacrifice themselves and blow people up and shoot people. They didn't care if they got killed themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I always think of terrorism in those terms. You have to be part of a group of people and have a plan. And the man who entered Parliament and was attempting to do what he did, if he'd had a real plan, he could have killed about 70 people before he was apprehended and killed, because there were the rooms filled with caucus members. Yep. And if he'd had a plan, I'm going to go in that room, I'm going to kill 30 of them, I'm going to go in that room and kill 30 of them, then I would say, all right, maybe he's part of a terrorist group. But the fact that he didn't do that showed to me that he was mentally unstable, that he somehow got through, and I think it was a criminal action, certainly, and a terrible one, and an awful one for the country and for certainly his family and everybody around.
Let me ask you as well, if you can, given the work you've done on citizenship and how much you and so many Canadians prize their citizenship, what do you infer from the actions of those more than 100 people who apparently don't care very much about their citizenship and have been prepared to go halfway around the world and fight for ISIS in an international jihad? Have you been able to figure out what motivates people to do that?
No, I don't understand what motivates people to go and fight for the jihad, because I don't know exactly what is. We don't know enough about ISIS. I've just gotten a wonderful book because I wanted to know more about the Yazidis, because when the Yazidis were on the hilltop, I thought, who are the Yazidis? And here I'd been living all my years as a journalist and working in government. I'd never heard of Yazidis. I felt really guilty because there were 40,000 of them sitting on the top of a mountain being threatened. And I learned that they were partly Islamic, partly Christian, Mithraic, everything that the Tigris-Euphrates Valley can bring out in religion, they were. And I thought, who are these people? I don't know anything about them. And our ignorance is so profound about that part of the world. So I don't really know, what is ISIS? Who are they? How did they really get formed? Are they a result of the Iraq War? Where are they? Where do they stand in relation to Al-Qaeda? All of this is terribly murky to me. And so I don't understand it fully. I wish I could know more, I just don't. And so you have to follow certain countries and see what their foreign policy is like, but you don't know that for sure.
If you're going to truly belong to Canada and be a citizen of Canada, do you sometimes have to exclude others as a part of that big tent? And by that I mean, there are lots of people around this world who don't have the kind of Western-oriented values that we have here on free speech, or freedom of religion, gender equality, and so on and so forth. So do we necessarily, as part of our citizenship, need to exclude those who don't believe that?
Well, I think when people come here, I think we have a very rigorous way of looking at people who come here. We pick our immigrants to this country at the embassies where they apply abroad, with the idea that in the future they will become citizens. No other country does that, really. No, you know, if you decide that you're going to go to France and you're going to work, etc., and nobody says to you, you will become a citizen after 4 to 6 years if you learn, you know, the Marseillaise, and if you learn about things, you will become a French citizen. I mean, when I lived in France for 5 years, and I had a Portuguese housekeeper, she had lived in France for 37 years, and she could not get French citizenship. She was listed as a migrant worker. She had no civil rights. She could be deported in 24 hours for any infraction that the police saw. And people don't realize in Canada that that's the kind of life that immigrants, that they call in France immigrants, live under, and in Germany as well. They don't have the civil rights. And we say, we will pick you, and we're going to be very rigorous about picking you, because if you decide that you'd like to apply for citizenship, then that's not the time at which we decide whether, you know, you're a nice person or a good person. We're deciding it before you let you come in. So of course people get through who have odd ideas and who might not fit in with us, but I don't like the term of exclusion for anything. And I think what we do is we have a rigorous choice of how we let the number of people in that we do, which is now I think about 160,000 a year. Or is that the number that become citizens?
Oh, well,
maybe 200,000.
We're 250, I think.
250 that come in, yeah. But you see, when we've brought those people in, 85% of them at the end of 4 or 5 years opt to become citizens. In the United States, it's 40%, because we have a pretty interesting country for people to become citizens in.
Let me ask you about that Portuguese woman in some respects, because should we fess this up here? When I went to see you give the Massey Lecture at Kerner Hall, and somebody in the audience asked you about what you thought of the temporary foreign worker program, you want to tell a TV audience what you had to say that night? You were not complimentary at all.
No, I don't think
What'd you say?
I don't want temporary foreign workers, because I think it downgrades people who are coming to this country.
You were tougher than that on the night.
Was I?
You were way tougher.
Well, tell me how tough I was.
Much stronger language. I think you said it was something like, it's a disgusting program, doesn't belong in Canada. Something like that.
I don't think you should have temporary foreign workers. I understand how you could have it for certain bumps of agriculture and so on. We've always had that. People come in and picks off fruit and do things like that. But to have them be part of the labor scheme, it's absolutely un-Canadian, and it should not be allowed, should not be done.
Abhorrent was the word you used.
Oh, good. Yes, I was looking for that word right now. It's abhorrent to have temporary foreign workers.
Okay. I want to ask you one last thing, and that is, we got the Stanley Cup from a former Governor General. We got the Grey Cup from a former Governor General. We have the Clarkson Cup from a former Governor General. What's happening with the Clarkson Cup?
Well, it's going to be played on March the 23rd in the Markham Arena, and that's for the 7th time now. And the cup resides, this beautiful cup resides in the Hockey Hall of Fame. You should go and look at it sometime.
And it's for the best women's hockey team in the country.
The best women's hockey team, and they play off, and it's actually the Montreal Stars have won it the most out of the last 7 years. But last year, I think Calgary won. And it's the best hockey you can ever see.
No, it does not suffer from the goonery that men's hockey does, let's put it that way.
The women aren't goons.
We're always delighted when you're able to find time for us here at TVO. Thanks so much to Adrienne Clarkson, the 26th GG of Canada.
Very nice to be with you, Steve, as always.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.